Good morning, afternoon, evening, wherever you are, and welcome to FreeThought Hour. Now, last week, as you know, I did a 3.5-hour marathon. This week is back to normal. We raised quite a lot of money, though. Before I'd finished my lap of the global fundraiser, we'd raised over 800, I think it was it dollars? I think it was dollars. Yes. And since then, with the American stretch of the show, went on 4 hours after me, and then the Australian leg, we have raised almost $9,000. So it was a really worthwhile, and thank you very much if you've contributed. You can still see it, of course, it's a podcast, and you can still donate to the wonderful cause of recovering from religion. Enough of that. But as usual, following global atheist news, which I hope some of you have just come from watching, we have a guest to interview. And I'm very pleased to say that tonight we have Ashley Pflieger. How the devil are you, Ashley?
Good. How about you? It's Pflieger.
I'm fine too, thank you. Now, the first question I've got to ask you is, how the devil do you say your name?
Pflieger.
Pflieger. Is it? It's got a
Pflieger.
silent P, like in Bath.
Yeah.
You know if you pee in the bath, you can't hear it.
Depends on where it lands, I guess.
Underwater, I was assuming. Well, I'm glad we survived that little naughty joke. Anyway, as I was saying before we came on air, you have had a very interesting life, haven't you? Because you've not only been in Christianity, but you've been deeply in Christianity, because for a while you were on the staff, weren't you?
Yeah. I was an assistant pastor.
Yeah. I want you to tell us about that.
Well,
can I full screen you while you do it?
Sure.
Great. Here we go.
Well, I was the way that I got into the ministry and being a pastor alongside with my ex-husband was because I had got recruited into a group called Master's Commission. It is a discipleship program for college-age kids, and so I chose to not go to college and chose to go to Master's Commission, which I did do Bible college courses through there and memorized verses, and we traveled from church to church the whole year, did a missions trip at the end of the year, and basically it was a segue to train and raise leaders or disciples to go into the ministry. So eventually my ex-husband and I became directors of the program after we got married, because I was a student and then an intern and then director. And from there, the group kind of fizzled out, the Master's Commission did, and we were basically solely on staff with the church at that point. And so at one point we were full-time, and then we eventually went part-time, and that was kind of around the time that things started to fizzle out for me a little bit. But that's how I got into the ministry, was being recruited into that Master's Commission group, because it was based out of the church I ended up pastoring at.
I see. So which denomination was this? Is it Baptist?
No, it's Open Bible, which is a very small denomination.
Mm-hmm.
And Open Bible derived out of Foursquare years ago, well, maybe the 60s or 70s, something along those lines. Mm-hmm. And is very similar to Assemblies of God churches. So it's Pentecostal, evangelical, very, very Pentecostal.
So you did all the speaking in tongues?
Oh, all the time. I mean, I spoke in tongues doing like dishes.
Really?
Oh my gosh, yeah.
It's
that was
okay.
a nut job.
I'm not going to ask you to demonstrate now, but
Good.
Go on then, go on, give us a bit of
All
tongues.
right. Yeah, I can. I mean, I can do it now. Oh gosh, this is embarrassing. You can just use syllables,
Right,
whatever you
yes.
want, and
Perfect.
then go into prayer. And it's kind of like, it was relaxing. It was kind of like a form of meditating in a way. But yeah, I mean, I
Uh-huh.
would pray out loud, pace. We would do the getting slain in the spirit. Um, getting like drunk in the spirit, where you would laugh hysterical.
Mhm.
Just really the extreme stuff for sure.
So that's the sort of, you've sparked off so many thoughts in my head now. First of all, shaka daka, whatever. It sounds to me a bit like what what actors were encouraged to say when they were milling about on the stage, being a crowd. they they would they would just have to do a murmur. We didn't need to hear the actual words, so they'd be all milling about, being a crowd, while the main characters are at the front of the stage, and they would be saying rhubarb and custard, rhubarb and custard.
That's funny.
So,
You or like, as in a joking way, it kind of sounds like it, but you could say bought a Mazda, should have bought a Honda.
whatever.
Mazda, the brand,
Yeah,
Honda. It's
sure.
it's just funny. Bought a Mazda, should have bought a Honda, and it sounds
Yes,
like you're speaking in tongues.
that's very much. Yes. Other brands are available. We're not supposed to be advertising. Anyway,
But
the other thing that you made me think of was, were you raised in that denomination as a child? Or
no,
did you?
not no. My
Oh,
mom took me to an Assemblies of God church for a few years when I was growing up. And so that was from about 5 years old until 8 years old. But I kind of started going on my own to youth group when I was 12. And I
oh,
got sucked in, and then I started finding rides with people and tried to get the rest of my family to go with me. So I was kind of the black sheep after a while. My mom still believes, but
yeah.
I kind of got in myself.
So you had a peer group of people that you related to, your friends, at
Yeah.
age 12, and you felt mature enough to run with that, and
I felt
and
like they were more my people. I had a harder
yeah,
time in school. I was kind of quiet and awkward, I felt like. And I guess I've always had a hard time with friends. And so I had a few close friends growing up in school, but I felt like the church people were my people because I could blend in easily. If I went and I did what they were doing,
they offered you a more a safer haven in some respect.
yeah. Because,
Mm,
I mean, I was going through some stuff as a young girl, around that time my parents were getting divorced, and
uh,
things
mm,
things were a little rough, and
mm,
and I'm very sensitive too. So I was
mm,
kind of like my way of trying to find
yeah,
comfort somewhere,
yeah,
because in that environment, there's altar calls, there's
yeah,
the very relaxing calm music, and you
mm,
think that
mm,
there's a God that's answering your prayers.
yeah,
People
mm,
are laying hands on each other and
mm,
praying
mm,
and giving comfort and hugging afterwards. And it
yeah,
was,
yeah.
I really liked that. It felt like that was what I needed at that time.
It's an alternative family, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's funny, I speak to lots of people who have been through their own personal journey, and you've brought to mind one who, at about the same age, I guess, about 11 or 12, maybe 14, his parents split up. He didn't really get owned by either of them. And so he found a church too and excelled at it. He was spotted as somebody who was intelligent and could sing, and then he was given a role to play like you were. And
Yeah.
eventually they marked him out as somebody of potential pastor material, and they sent him off to seminary. Is that the right word? Probably not.
Yeah.
And he got right through, excelled through the course, came up against the final exams, because of course, as you know, you have to take two, one in ministry and one in theology. And just before he sat his final exams, he read the Bible.
The
You'll
whole
never
thing all the way through.
Yeah. You'll never guess what happened then.
He became an atheist. That's how it works. You know,
Yes.
there is the saying that the road to atheism is littered with Bibles that have been read cover to cover.
Yeah. It's the atheist's best recruiting tool, I think.
It really is. I mean, that's kind of what led me to my atheism, was just digging into the Bible more.
And spotting obvious flaws and contradictions and impossibilities and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
So we got going through your story, you got to the stage where you and your then, I guess, new husband were both in a relatively responsible role, pastors or
Yeah.
assistant pastors. Is he a pastor and you were the assistant pastor? How did that work?
We were both assistant pastors,
Yeah.
and
Mhm.
there was a senior pastor and his
Uh-huh.
wife.
Yeah.
My ex-husband was also the worship leader too. So he's still an assistant pastor out there too.
Right.
Same exact role, doing the same stuff.
Yeah.
It's been 8.5 years.
Wow. Yeah. That you've been separated, you mean?
Since I left, yeah.
Right. So that must have been a pretty traumatic experience, because you not only walked away from the church, which previously you'd found offered you succor, offered you, a comfortable berth, but you also had to walk away from your relationship.
Yeah, it was a really pretty dramatic and abrupt way that I went about it too. I really wish that I would have done things differently. But at the time I really felt like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe. I got to get out of here. And the church was in Iowa, and I wanted to move back where I grew up in Ohio,
Yeah.
which between the two is about a 10-hour drive.
Yeah.
So it's quite a ways away. So when I left, it was really pretty abrupt. I fit what I could in a suitcase, and my daughter and I got on a bus and I left, and I didn't really say anything to anybody except for the senior pastor and my ex-husband, really.
So you just vanished.
I vanished. And there were some people that reached out to me after I had left, but people were really aggressive and hounding me, harassing me, really angry, not really willing to hear my reasons why. They
So
were just...
where were they doing that? Was this an online thing that they were hounding you, or?
Some people had my phone number, obviously, so I would get texts and phone calls.
Yeah.
And I also still had a Facebook account activated at the time, so people were sending me messages.
Yeah. It's not very Christian behavior, is it? Doing that hounding.
No, it was really overwhelming. I kind of disappeared for about 7 years. I went off of all social media, changed my phone number, everything.
Mm. Well, I'm glad you seem to have come through it all right.
Yeah. I mean, just time heals, obviously. I mean, it's been 8.5 years, so I'm past a lot of it. And my ex-husband and I, we have a daughter together, and it was a little rough at first, but it's really important for us to be cordial and get along and move past all of that for the sake of her. I mean,
yes, parenting.
So,
yes,
yeah.
Co-parenting. Yes, absolutely. Yes. So, how's your situation now? I mean, you've obviously had to reinvent yourself in Ohio, not Iowa. So you've now got a new career, presumably, which doesn't involve anything short.
I'm actually a stay-at-home mom. I did work for
All
a
right.
little bit,
Yeah. Yeah.
but to be honest, I didn't have any skills in anything or any schooling in anything else when I came back. When I moved back to Ohio, I got lucky with a few jobs, just kind of physically showing up to some places and saying, "Hey, can I speak to your manager? Here's my resume. I really need a job." And so I worked in a doctor's office for a couple of years. I worked in the hospital doing this, research and development type job for the trauma department. And then I went into invoicing for this other company. But around the time that I had left that company, I had a really bad MS relapse. I have MS, multiple sclerosis.
Oh,
And
yeah.
so, which I'm doing okay right now. I'm pretty stable.
Yeah.
Medicine I'm on is great. But my husband said, you don't have to work since you have good and bad days, kind of just stay home. And so I've been doing that for about 3 years. And so I'm obviously remarried, and we've been together for about 5, 6 years, 7, something like that. And if I had to have to count and I have to think back, but we've been together for a while for the majority of that time that I've been back. I mean, I came back and so not for the first couple of years, but
Yeah.
I've known him since second grade. And
Oh, right. So you took up with an old school friend. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. Somebody I grew up with and went to school with and had kind of always known, and felt very safe and stable. And so everything is a lot better now, very safe.
Excellent. Good.
Just normal life. No requirements to go anywhere on Wednesdays or Sundays.
Well, congratulations. You managed to have come out of it relatively unscathed.
Well, I don't know. I mean, I do have my bad days. I did have some pretty traumatic experiences going through all of that. Some of the things I don't talk about publicly, but just because they also involve my daughter. But it was really hard leaving because there's a level of me that understands, because back when I was in that world and somebody would leave the church, it was devastating. You felt like that person was backsliding and you were worried for their well-being eternally and all of that stuff. And so it's really heartbreaking when somebody leaves, and I understand that, but it became very aggressive and way too intense at the end. They were very controlling. And it wasn't just like they were, and by they, I specifically mean like the senior pastor of the church.
Yeah.
And there was a regional director, and they were really kind of influencing my ex-husband a lot. Regional director of the denomination is what I mean. So these two men, they were very, very controlling over me. And when I started to question things and back away and say, I want to leave, I was really pretty blunt about it too. I want to leave. I don't want to be here anymore. I want to go back home. I knew I didn't want to be married. I was pretty open about that. But the day that I tried to leave, the senior pastor, was at my door, banging on my door, screaming my name. He called me like 33 times, left me 8 voicemails. He was losing his mind that I was leaving. At one point, he called me into his office right before I left, and this was kind of one of the things that was the last straw for me. But he told me that I needed to run all of my decisions through him because I was incapable of doing that for myself. And it was just really strange. And I was like, I'm getting out of here. This
Utterly,
place is a cult, man.
utterly condescending or patronizing, it sounds to me.
Very,
Mm,
very. And so, yeah, they wanted to have complete control over me, isolating me from my family.
yeah. It's typical of religions that they should be so misogynistic, should want to control the females rather than, I guess, men who left that cult, should we call it a cult,
Yeah,
didn't
it's a
didn't
cult.
get the same treatment. They didn't have 33 phone calls and people beating on their front door.
No, no, it was really strange. And even afterwards, after I had been gone for months and months and we were starting to go through the divorce process, the pastor was still getting a hold of me, harassing me. He called that first job that I had gotten even and talked to the office manager, just telling her
Really?
a whole bunch of lies about me, trying to get me fired, which
So
was just horrible because I didn't have anything. I didn't really
yeah,
have a penny to my name.
they wanted to take even that away from you. Yeah.
Yeah.
So why do you think they feel like this? Why are they so offended by somebody who decides they don't want to play the game anymore?
Um, I don't, I really don't know. I mean, I kind of wonder if some of it has to do with control. They were losing control of me.
Mm,
It wasn't going the way that they thought it was supposed to go,
mm.
and maybe they feared that I was being influenced by the devil. I mean, I was accused of that. You're just wanting to, you know, follow the lies of the devil, and if you leave, then you're not following God's plan. He's not calling you away.
It's
Things
it's
like
like
that.
it's like a protection racket, isn't it? I mean, they offer you threats, call you all sorts of names, sinner, and you're going to hell, and none of this is real.
Yeah,
It's
or
it's all,
Jezebel.
yes, yes. It's all an invented threat, and they claim to have the solution, which is come and join us and belong again, and that's invented too. It's a cure to a non-existent condition.
Yeah,
Mm,
yeah. They really tried to play their cards with fear, for
mm,
sure.
mm,
But I don't know. And at the time, it was really hard for me to communicate, well, to my ex husband and stuff too,
mm,
what my mind was trying to process with the flaws that I was seeing. I obviously at the time couldn't communicate what bothered me as well as I can now
mm, mm,
about the doctrine specifically,
mhm.
but because it was all new to me, and but at the same time, I was never really given the chance to show any of the things that I saw. Nobody wanted to acknowledge it at all. It was
Mm,
just
mm.
it was really very strange. It was just kind of like my husband and I eventually kind of fizzled away because I was like, I can't do this anymore. I'm not really the best at hi. I'm not really the best at hiding my feelings either. So I wore my feelings um on my sleeve. And so it was really hard for me to fake it during worship. I
Mm,
sat up in the very front
mm.
row, and and in that world, it's like you're really into the worship, but up in the front,
Yeah,
you got to
yeah,
show everybody how you got to do it.
yeah,
so,
yeah, yeah.
so
Setting the example.
yeah, and eventually I
Mm,
started kind of just standing there and putting my head down, not singing the words or anything because it was just awkward to me.
yeah,
And eventually I started sitting in the back or just skipping service altogether and
it's,
hanging out like in the kids area.
it's,
Things like
it's-
that. I just couldn't do it. I couldn't fake it.
well, I've got a hypothesis as to why they might feel like this, and why they might feel so affronted when somebody like you says they want to leave.
Yeah.
And my idea goes like this. It says that because they don't have any real justification, no actual evidence for the belief system that they subscribe to, the only way they can continue believing in it, is by reiteration, by emotional involvement, by owning it as their identity, and by more or less brainwashing themselves by having to do this ritualistic praying regularly, this meetings regularly, everything, grace before meals and all that sort of stuff, in an attempt to convince themselves that it's true. And when somebody like you wants to leave, it makes them question their own situation. It makes them doubt and wonder, and they don't like that. It's uncomfortable. So what do you think about my idea?
I definitely think that that's true because they were so uncomfortable that they didn't even want to hear what I had to say at all about it.
Mm, mm.
It was just the automatic response of, well, you're wrong and you're being enticed by the devil, or whatever sort of dismissal they were giving.
Whatever story they could come up with that they thought might persuade you to change your mind. Yeah.
Yeah.
Because I'm a retired science teacher, and
Oh, that's cool.
I don't have to believe in the force of gravity. I know that if I leap out of this window, I'm going to fall.
Yeah.
And so that I don't have to own that. It's a fact. It's out there. It's not in here, and I don't need to emotionally get involved in it, because it's just bald as and completely rational, and it doesn't owe anything to my feelings.
Mm-hmm.
But belief systems are not like that. Belief
No.
systems, they don't have any of those incontrovertible facts. So
Mm-mm.
it's always a choice of whether you want to believe it or not. And here in the UK, we have this silly thing, an established church, thanks to Henry VIII, who wanted to divorce a few wives, and the Pope wouldn't let him. So he more or less sacked the Pope and said, I'm going to be the local Pope, and set up the Church of England. And because of that, we have an archbishop of our own national church. And he has just got himself a radio show, which starts tomorrow, in fact. And his first episode is telling how he has had doubts, and he's had depression, and he thinks that depression is horrible because you hate yourself. But then there's this glimmer of hope. God, who still loves you despite you don't love yourself. I'm going to listen to this show tomorrow. It's going to be very amusing, I think.
Yeah, that's so. Yeah, I wonder what he would have to say about depression and the cause of it. That's one of the other things that I had dealt with during all of that. Is I struggle with depression and anxiety, and I kind of always have. And I'm sure that there's a few other questionable things there too, a few other diagnoses. But I mean, and I have PTSD now too because of some of the things that had happened. But I went all of those years praying and hoping that God was going to heal me, and being untreated, not being on any sort of medication. And it really kind of messed me up, because especially being in that evangelical world, it's all about the experience, and it's very energetic, and the priming in worship, and then the altar calls, and it's really all very emotional, and you're pouring your emotions into it, and you're going in it with this high, and then when you leave, you hit a low and you're looking for the high again. And so it's this endless cycle where you slap a band-aid on it, and you think that your depression is going away, that you feel happier, but that's not really what is happening at all. And so I eventually, just within the last few years, started getting myself on medication again.
Mm, yeah,
And so I'm definitely really big on people not foregoing medication in
mm,
hopes that God will heal them or that prayer will work,
yeah,
and to trust medication if you need it.
absolutely. Well,
Because
medication's been tested and shown to be safe
exactly.
and effective, whereas prayer has been tested and has been shown not to work. I don't know if you're familiar
Yeah.
with that experiment.
Yeah, it showed that it was nothing different than things happening at random.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So something you just said there, because earlier you said about, I don't know, there was some sort of physicality towards involved in your services where you were you not only speaking in tongues, but there was some, I don't know, was it?
Slain in the spirit.
Hmm. Yeah, which reminded me of there's some Indian sect that they called the whirling dervishes, and they spin themselves until they go, I don't know, you giddy, I suppose, when you spin, and that's a sort of mental high in,
Yeah.
and then of course after that you've got to come down, and so as you
Yeah.
say, it's a cyclic process. But
Yeah, it definitely is.
this is what has made you do what you currently do, has it? Because I know that you now work for the Clergy Project.
Oh, I don't work for the Clergy Project. I mean everything through the Clergy Project is volunteer.
Yeah, yeah. Oh,
You
I didn't
know,
mean didn't mean
everything
you
that
were employed. I didn't mean you were financially rewarded.
Oh,
But
yeah, yeah.
you do voluntary work for the Clergy Project.
Yeah, I mean, I help out here and there with some social media stuff. Like the Twitter. I just kind of got that going, and then I started doing some video interviews, really similar to what we're doing here.
Yeah,
Not live so far. So far, I've
yeah,
just done some pre-recorded ones
yeah,
and just busting out a bunch of interviews with other Clergy Project members
yeah,
on how they got into religion, how they got into ministry, and why they left,
yeah, yeah.
and then putting them up on my YouTube and
Which we're going to put in a ticker that goes along the bottom of the screen for you. What's it called?
Apostate Ashley.
Apostate Ashley. Yes, I know we had a conversation about this, didn't we?
Yeah, Catherine came up with actually Ashley, and I really liked that too.
It's got a ring to it, but unfortunately, you're not the only people to have used it.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm not that makeup girl that has like 80,000. So,
Well, there you go. Yeah, yeah. So to separate you from the imposters who have also called themselves actually Ashley, you're now apostate Ashley, and
yes.
so if people go to YouTube and put in apostate Ashley, they'll find your videos.
Yeah, they're really pretty interesting. I wanted to hear why other people
Mm,
left,
mm,
and I thought that it was really important for those stories to get out there because
mm,
around the time that I left
mm,
myself, there was some information out there on YouTube, and
mm,
there were some podcasts and stuff.
mm,
But now I'm thinking that there's so much atheist information out there now, and the more the better. And this is also slightly different because it's stories of ex-clergy, and
mm,
not just evangelical pastors like me. So far one of them that I've done was a missionary to China, and
mm,
then one was an Episcopalian priest.
mm,
Another was a Catholic priest who
mm.
is actually he's gay, and he had to kind of hide that in a way.
Yeah,
And
classic.
it's a very interesting story because obviously a lot that comes with religion is oppression on groups like the LGBTQ community. So the poor guy
Victimization.
felt,
It's victimization.
definitely. And
Oh,
so the poor guy felt the need to kind of hide it by being a priest because
yeah, yeah, yeah,
it was a way of being discreet and respected in the community.
yeah, yeah.
And then
It's-
I did Lon, who is our TCP president. And
mhm,
so far I have quite a few, and I have a few others that I'm editing. I did
yeah.
Dave Warnock's the other day.
I want to talk
And
to you about him in a minute. Yes.
oh yeah, him and I are real good friends.
Mhm,
Because he came out of Foursquare churches, I was in Open Bible churches, which, like I said earlier, very similar, and
mhm,
our stories are really very similar. Like,
mhm,
we both had a controlling senior pastor
mhm,
that was
mhm,
kind of crazy a little bit,
mhm,
and we both have neurological diseases.
mhm, mhm, mhm.
He's a
Well,
good friend of mine.
great, great. So you mentioned that. What was I going to say? You mentioned that. Well, let's get on to Dave Warnock, and it'll come back to me what I wanted to say earlier, because you wore his T-shirt in the photo you let me use for our poster, and
Yeah.
some people picked up on that and said
Oh, they did. That's
said
cool.
how much they admire Dave Warnock, because for the benefit of my audience, let's put the picture. He's got ALS, and it's virtually a death sentence, isn't it, in the next few
Yeah.
years? But he's on tour. What's he calling his tour?
The
Sonia,
Dying Out Loud tour.
dying out loud. He's not crying out loud, but
Nope.
he's not in the closet. He's publicly dying. So dying out loud. Yes.
Yeah, it's really great. And what really happens, I just have to say it because I just think that this is super cool. So with ALS,
Mm,
it's a neurological disease that is fatal.
mm.
They usually die within 3 to 5 years.
Yes. We
And
call in this
it's
country. It's been called um, motor neurone disease, and Stephen Hawking famously had it, and he amazingly survived with it for over 50 years.
what?
I know. Yes, it's
I
very
didn't know
unusual.
that.
Yeah.
Well,
Yes.
so
He's now dead, but he was a cutting edge physicist, cosmologist, who
yeah,
right up there. Yeah.
I didn't know that he dealt with that for 50 years. That's
Mm,
really actually pretty great that, I
mm,
mean, other than any sort of suffering or pain or anything, but that's really pretty great. So
yeah. Mm,
with the ALS, it starts with your arms and then moves on to your legs. So
mm,
you move function in your arms and then
mm,
you lose function in your legs.
mm,
So with that shirt that I'm wearing, it
mm.
has a hourglass
Yes, yes.
thing with his face in it, and his body is disappearing,
Oh,
and
yes.
that's kind of like a symbol. It symbolizes
Yeah, yeah.
what's
Mm,
happening.
mm,
And so I really think it's great, and it's a good subject for people to get onto, is the fact that he's dying as an atheist, not believing in the afterlife.
yes.
And that is such a huge thing because so many people fear hell and fear what's going to happen afterwards.
Yes.
And so it's so great to just kind of get that out in the open. That was
Mm,
one of the first things that I dismissed was
mm,
hell.
yeah. Mm. Well, it doesn't make a lot of sense, does it, for a loving God to make those who don't believe in him or haven't even heard of him burn for eternity? That's not, those two ideas don't fit together, do they?
There's so much that's like oxymoron in
Yes,
there.
yes, yes, there is. Yes. So perhaps I'll invite Dave to be my guest on a show in future.
Oh
It's a
yeah.
really horrible condition, and
Oh,
we don't have a cure for it. We don't know what causes it,
nope.
and so it's all a mystery. Hmm.
It is all a mystery.
So you don't believe in hell anymore. And Dave, of course, is also an atheist now, having been through the same mill as you, having been
Mm-hmm.
in Christianity and got to be a pastor and then gave it all up. And he is now, I guess is he raising money for a cause like
Well, I'm guessing that he makes money probably through the merch, and he just wrote a book.
yeah.
I'm not sure if he came out with it publicly yet or not. I think a little bit, but he wrote a book called Childish Things,
Mhm.
about his story of coming out of the ministry. And I think he has a Patreon that you can find on his
Mhm.
YouTube that's called The GD Show.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, I think through there, you can donate. They are a nonprofit,
Mm.
501c3, I believe.
Mm. Yeah. So you helped me last week raise money for recovering from religion. You're now helping with the Clergy Project,
Yeah.
which is another very good charity because of all the people who leave religion, and that's what I was going to talk about a minute ago, because you're right, the information on available now via the internet is so much more than it was even just the 8.5 years ago when you were on the way out.
Yeah.
But, there's a number of these organizations because if you're in the clergy, you've got so much more to lose than the ordinary member of the congregation because it's your job. And
Yeah, and it's not like a normal job.
no,
Everything,
mm,
I mean, like your whole livelihood, everything is
mm,
involved in that. Usually your family, all your friends,
mm,
every
mm,
aspect of your social life,
mm, mm,
your children and spouse.
mm. And the status that you hold in the community. You have
Yeah.
to give all of that up because traditionally the clergy have been put on a pedestal a bit. I mean, if you go back a few hundred years, they were probably the only people in the village that could read and write. So they were
Yeah.
revered for their abilities. And giving that up, losing that exalted position in society is a crunch, isn't it? So the
Very
clergy
humbling.
the clergy project is needed to help these people find their way out from this web that they are entrenched in. And there's another one, isn't there? There's Freedom from Religion
Hmm.
Foundation. Do you know anything about that one?
Yeah, freedom from religion is essentially the same thing as the Clergy Project, because it encompasses anybody that left religion.
Mm,
So, anybody in the congregation or whatever position or non
mm,
position they had
mm,
can get support. And I believe that there's physical in person support groups as well
mhm,
as virtual ones.
mhm.
So it's essentially the same type of thing. You can
Yeah. Mm.
go for support. And there's the Secular Therapy Project as well, where you can actually get secular therapy.
Oh, right. Yes, there's that one too, isn't there? You're right. Yes. Mm. So there's quite a few of these organizations, and they're very needed.
They really are, because there is so much to unpack when you leave from there. And not even just pastors. I mean, there are people whose family, or like if they're a pastor's kid,
Mm,
or or just their family is very, very religious.
mm.
It's really hard to pull away from some of that when so much of your life is involved in all of that, your family.
Yeah.
And so sometimes you need an outlet of people to talk to, maybe if nobody else knows about it, and they're kind of your escape.
Yeah.
They're
So
people that
you're
you can actually be open with about it.
That's right. You might still be in the closet in your own community, but
Yeah.
you need somebody who's had a similar experience to stop yourself feeling like you're the only one.
Yeah, and I would say from personal experience, it's probably a good idea to reach out for resources like that and really think about how you're maybe going to go about some of this, whether how verbal you're going to be about your atheism,
Mm,
things like that, or if you're going to leave your community, leave your church,
mm,
maybe to make a slight plan and have some sort of support system in place, because it really made things a little chaotic for me with the way that I
mm,
left. How,
mm,
I wish I would have maybe looked into some of those resources at the time. I didn't
mm,
get into the Clergy Project until after I'd actually left.
mm, mm, mm.
And
Yeah.
so even if somebody is still in like still practicing and active as clergy, they
Mm.
can still apply to be in the Clergy Project and be screened.
Yeah, yeah.
And
And kept hidden.
yeah,
Mm,
they
mm.
can even join with a pseudonym.
Yeah, yeah. Mm. So I was going to ask you how you intend or how you are raising your own daughter, but because although it's not in your case, it is not a different because you weren't when you were brought up, you weren't indoctrinated heavily. It doesn't sound
Yeah.
like
Mm-mm.
you more or less did it yourself when you were an adolescent.
Yeah.
So I don't suppose that you're raising your daughter in a very different way from how you were brought up.
Yeah, not really very much different. My parents were really pretty open with me about
Mm,
it and talked with me about things,
mm,
and respected
mm,
where I was at and what I
mm,
decided. And
mm.
so I'm very much the same way with
Yeah,
her.
yeah.
I do, if the conversation comes up, I am open with
Mm,
her as well as my stepson about the dangers that come with it. If,
mm,
if the conversation comes up, which usually isn't very often.
mm.
But it's a little harder because my daughter does have the influence of her dad, who is still a pastor.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
I do have to respect him
Mm,
and
mm.
his right to share his thoughts with
Yeah,
her as well. So I do have to kind of take a little bit of a neutral approach, a little bit. I
yeah,
am honest, but I do try to take the approach of I'm going to support you, whatever you decide.
yeah.
If you want to come and talk with me about these things, I'll tell you how I feel,
Mm,
but it's your choice, whatever you want to do.
mm.
She doesn't seem too interested in it,
Good.
but she also does know my thoughts on it too.
Mm, yeah. Well, that's how I feel because everybody should be left to make their own decision in matters like this.
Yeah.
And it's easy because as an atheist, I don't have anything to impose on people. I don't have a belief system. I don't have any values or principles that are associated with my atheism. Of course, I have values and principles. They are human ones,
Yeah.
which I've evolved, the same as everybody else. They don't belong to any claimant, no church claims to be able to deliver my morality because I don't need anybody above me distributing morality in my direction. I'm a human. I behave
Yeah.
humanely. So, but I don't think that we should try and. We haven't got anything to impose, is what I'm trying to say. It's the
That's
religious people who do. They have their controlling doctrine that they do wish to impose, and we don't.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Because, I mean, if the conversation comes up and they want to say something, I will indulge them tactfully. But for the most part, it doesn't really need to come up. I mean, there's been a few times where I have even said, you're still pretty young. This is a pretty big subject.
Mm,
Maybe let's not worry about it at right now,
mm,
because I'm not pushing any of that on her, and that's not
mm,
anything that needs to
mm,
technically be worried about. I don't know. Some of the things within the Bible are just so kind of messed up and big subjects that it feels odd to talk to my young daughter about it sometimes.
How old is she now?
She's 12.
Yeah, yeah. I've got a 14-year-old
That's cool. Pretty
and
close in age, yeah.
and a 10-year-old who will be 11 in 2 weeks.
Oh, that's fun.
Yeah. So I think the important thing here is the word from, freedom from religion, because it's written into a lot of constitutions that we should have freedom of religion. You know, we
Yeah.
should be free to choose which denomination, which sect, which cult even, and I'm not sure what the difference is, we
Me neither.
all we want to belong to. But very few constitutions have written into them we should have freedom from religion. You know, we should be free not to get involved in a religion if that's how we feel. That's the word from needs to be stressed more often than it is, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
And that's why Freedom from Religion organization is another good one. Mm.
Yeah, and the oh my goodness, what am I thinking of? That's FFRF, and then there's the one with Dan Barker and his wife.
Oh, isn't that the Clergy Project? That's the one that you've been working for.
Well, there's the Clergy Project, but then there's, oh my gosh, why am I having a brain fart right now? Sorry, it sounds really close to freedom from religion. I can't remember.
Well, Dan Barker is another person I'd love to get as my guest because I really admire him. Because not only has he managed to come out of Christianity and does a wonderful job now of promoting non-belief. If I don't know whether he'd accept that description of it, but
Oh yeah, I think so, probably.
promoting critical thinking. But as well as that, he's also a great musician, and he wrote a number of, I think he wrote 2 Christian musicals that
Yeah.
when he was still in the flock, that they performed at Christmas.
That's funny. I haven't heard those, but him and his wife, they really promote Freedom from Religion Foundation.
Yeah, that's the one you were trying to think of, calling
Is
normalizing
it?
atheism. Thanks,
Yeah.
normalizing. Can we call you
Yes, thank you.
normalizing?
Yeah, I couldn't think of it, but they really promote the separation of religion and government.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
I think that is super important. That's been one
yeah,
of those things that's been on my heart a lot lately too, even
yeah,
just in our local community.
yeah. Yeah, the founders of the American Constitution, they really got that aspect right, making you a secular country, unlike stupid old Britain. But unfortunately, since then, the various religious factions have been desperately clawing at government, trying to get their ideas adopted. We've got all sorts of things going on in states like Texas and
I know.
Florida, where they're trying to prevent any sort of abortion, deny
I
people
know.
abortion,
That's so horrible.
and force some sort of alternative teaching to evolution into schools and all sorts of
Yeah.
nonsense like that, despite the Constitution being secular. Hello, Hassan.
What about the
What's your question?
parents?
What about the parents who want to make their children to be in their religion and the child has no way to get out of them? Well, that's yes, a lot of people encounter that problem.
Yeah, I think quite a few people, I mean, especially um in the Muslim belief,
Yeah.
a lot, I mean, it's dangerous to leave for a lot of
Only.
people.
Yes,
And
yes.
but I think that if you're in a position where you can't really talk about it with your parents or your family members and you're wanting to leave, I just realized I have red hair from scratching myself. But I think that's where those resources like the freedom from religion, the secular therapy project, and those places where you can talk with people and have support without your family really knowing about it. You could
Mm,
still have that outlet.
mm,
And it, and I don't really know what to say about that and getting out because it's just so different for each person. And there are some people that some family members, or some people that just choose because of certain family members to not really say anything, just, to pacify that person.
yeah. It interferes with families, doesn't it?
It really does. And it makes it really hard when you open that can of worms.
Mm,
So, I mean, you have to be ready to open that can of worms and be honest about it,
mm.
because some family members are not necessarily going to receive it in the way
Yeah,
you think.
yeah. I-
So,
In one family, you can have a sort of fundamentalist person, usually the older members of the family, like the grandparents, and you can have more moderate people who are perhaps a later generation, all in one family. And they can't converse about this topic because it would cause so much friction. And they end up with an elephant in the room, a subject that they can't talk about. And they've got to talk about the weather instead. This is one of the
yeah.
horrible things about religion. And especially, all religions want to get people when they're young, because that's when they're
Mm-hmm.
impressionable. And that's
Oh my
when
gosh, yes.
hmm, that's when they can get them sucked in and grasped.
Well, I mean, and if you think about it, I mean, the Bible is, pretty much any of these major religions are against like homosexual relationships. And if you really think about that, they want to promote reproduction.
Yes, yes,
So if you have more children, you can indoctrinate those children. Your
yes,
belief system will grow.
yes, yes. That's right. There's two ways of spreading a religion. One is managing to convert people into it, and that's difficult. Trying to persuade people. Yeah, I get the Jehovah's Witnesses knocking at the door, and they're not very persuasive, I'm afraid.
No.
But the other way is simply to have lots of children and then get them when they're young. And
Yep.
children believe what they are told up to a certain age.
Yeah, definitely. And, and that kind of goes along with how I got brought up into it. It's really embarrassing. I actually dropped out of high school and joined the ministry, and I took my Bible college courses through that. And I
Mm,
mean, I was ready to literally give everything up.
wow. Yeah. Wow. Well, I'm so glad that you've survived.
I know. I mean, it really just kind of clouded my mind. It made me delusional in a lot of ways.
Mm.
It's so weird too because I feel like I am such a logical, realistic, black and white type of personality.
It's a
It's
it's a sort of cognitive dissonance, isn't it? This is what the Archbishop of Canterbury is going to be talking about in his new radio show tomorrow. How in one brain, in his own head, he at the same time hated himself and believed in a loving savior. And it just it made him mentally ill, basically.
yeah.
Mm.
Wow.
Well, on that rather dark note, we haven't managed to put the world to rights at all, I'm afraid. But you have been fantastic, Ashley. Thank you very
Yeah,
much for
thanks. So have you. This
being
was
my
fun.
guest. Good. Yes. Well, you come on again. A lot of my guests say they've enjoyed it and wouldn't mind coming back. Sometime we'll have you back, and maybe we'll have more people, and we can have a panel on an issue of some sort.
Yeah, maybe we can have Catherine on. She should have her internet back on now.
Yeah. Yes, she should actually. A couple of days ago, she was I think 24th. What's today? Yeah, she should
Yeah,
have.
something like that.
Yeah, she should have been connected. Okay.
Yeah.
Well, we'll raise Catherine from the disconnection.
Yeah.
It's not quite resurrection, but it's a modern tech version of it.
Yeah.
Ashley,
Well, cool.
thank you very much. You've been fantastic.
Thanks. So have you. Thank you.
Here's your outro.
Oh.